Wyatt Bikes is a bike manufacturer located in Wisconsin that produces American-made bikes. What does that mean exactly? Well, the aluminum is made in the US and everything is welded, CNC'd, heat treated, and even painted in-house. It's a pretty small operation with only two bikes in their lineup: the Vista, a trail hardtail, and the Maverick, a do-it-all fat bike. I've been testing out the Maverick over the past few months, and if you saw my first impression video on it, it's no secret I felt quite at home on the first ride. Since then, I've taken it on more than a few dirt rides, thanks to a shockingly mild winter, while also hitting some unpacked and groomed snow trails. Was my first impression a fluke, or has the Maverick lived up to its impressive first performance? Let's get into it. The first time I came across Wyatt Bikes was during my semi-regular generic Google search for fat bikes. Fat bikes don't usually receive a lot of attention from places like Pink Bike, so this random search is a good way to see what's going on in fat bike land. My first thought on the Maverick was, honestly, hey, that looks a lot like the RSD Mare I've been riding for the past couple of years. While it does share a lot of traits with that bike, it's a good reminder of how component choice and small geometry changes can make a significant difference in how bikes ride. When you buy the bike, you get to do some custom configuration on your components to fit your needs, which includes tire and wheel size and fork travel. I received the bike with a 120mm Ren fork, the longest travel option Wyatt offers when purchasing it, but I also took it on a few rides with Ren's rigid fork, which is another option available. As always, I really tried to put the bike through a lot of different riding situations as well as component setups to get the full experience. So let's jump into what I found over the past few months. After reaching out to Wyatt and speaking with, Wyatt himself, a navy blue Maverick in a size medium arrived at my door. If you've watched my channel before, you'll know I almost always ride a large frame, despite being on the border of sizes in most cases. The sizing is a little more modern on this bike, so while I might be able to make a large work, I think the medium is a pretty perfect fit. With the 120mm fork at 20% sag, you get a 67.6 degree head tube angle, a 74.6 seat tube angle, 472 reach, and 644 stack. The rear end has 20mm of adjustment, going from 445 on the short side up to 465 in the longest. 445 isn't super short for a fat bike, but it's still short enough to make the bike a little more playful despite the big tires. Keeping on that theme, the bottom bracket height is a touch higher than many fat bikes at just 60 mils of drop. All else equal, a higher bottom bracket can make a bike feel less stable but more maneuverable at the same time, which is really helpful when you've got some not so nimble fat tires. This, when paired with the rest of the geometry numbers mentioned, made for a ride that encouraged you to hit bonus lines and take on tougher obstacles. I didn't take it on any trails I've never ridden before, but I hit everything faster and with more confidence than I had in the past. The Mavericks also sold a lot with a rigid fork, as I mentioned, which makes sense since a lot of people are buying it mainly for snow riding or maybe the beach. The geometry numbers obviously change because of this due to a lower axle to crown measurement, but it's for the better in this case. As the front end comes down slightly, you end up with a little quicker steering, but a more stable ride in general. The standover also comes down to 28.5 inches or 724 millimeters, which is really helpful when you're in soft snow and end up being several inches shorter than you normally are. One thing I also appreciate is that Wyatt didn't start with a super steep seat tube, because once this fork was swapped in, you'd end up way too far forward than is optimal. And honestly, they did a good job on that in general. Everything leans more toward the trail side of things, but not so far that it's tough to ride on snow or in slow situations. This leads me into one of my favorite things about this bike, the capability. Of course, it has everything that comes with being a fat bike in general. Traction for days, soft surface flotation, and that monster truck feel. But where the Maverick was on another level was how it rode overall. I touched on this a bit already, but from the very first ride, I just clicked with this bike. It felt familiar. There was no need to change my riding style, no awkwardness felt. It all just felt comfortable, and the bike always felt composed. It's a bike that handles Black Diamond trails with drops, jumps, and rock gardens with ease. Obstacles that gave me some pause before felt like no big deal. I mean, it is still a hardtail, but with fat or plus tires on it and a 120mm fork up front, it's just a blast to ride on more advanced sections of trail. That's not to say that it's a bear to handle and ride on greens and blues or snowy trails. The steering isn't sluggish and the ride isn't blah or bland, especially with the rigid fork on it. It's not lightweight either, even by fat bike standards, but somehow it rides lighter and quicker and more nimble than what the scale and the geometry says. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but part of it is probably due to the 26-inch wheel set, which I initially wasn't so sure of. I'll admit I was fully on the 27.5 fat train, but after riding them on dirt and then a lot of soft, unpacked snow, Wyatt was right to spec these and may have even convinced me to switch from 27.5 to 26 on my personal fat bike. They're easier to get up to speed, you can fit wider tires on them for more float, and they turn a little easier and were kind of the perfect complement to the geometry to make the bike super capable. The final thing I want to touch on about the Maverick is the quality. And I'm not even really talking about the components. With oversized tubes, gussets, and CNC'd yokes to handle some abuse, the frame is burly looking. The welds are solid, the cable routing and management system is well thought out, and the cosmetic touches look great. As an example of this attention to detail and quality, Wyatt even 3D prints his own brake hose mounts for the Wren rigid fork because he didn't think the stock ones did a good enough job. There just wasn't anything I found that seemed to be an afterthought or a glaringly obvious mistake. To be honest, my only real issue with the bike is that I wish the seat tube had a bottle mounting location, and it could have easily been done by offsetting the dropper port. There is a spot for a second bottle under the down tube, and I never found myself actually wanting a second bottle while I had it, so maybe I'm just being nitpicky for no reason. I'm just overall impressed by the quality of the frame, which is even more impressive considering that the majority of it is being done in-house by a very small team. Of all the fat bikes I've ridden over the years, the Wyatt Maverick is probably right near the top of my list of favorites. It's incredibly capable on dirt without sacrificing much of its snow season performance. It's perfect for someone wanting a 4-season bike that allows them to ride all winter, but keep up with their friends, or maybe even lead them, on the trail the rest of the year. If you're after a quiver killer or a forever bike, it's got a high-quality American-made frame that'll not only take a beating, but fits a whole bunch of different tire sizes to give you a few bikes in one. And to illustrate that last point a little further, I was pretty dang close to selling a few bikes to make some room for the Maverick because it's just that good. Thanks again to Wyatt for sending this bike out. It's not something they really do, so I feel lucky to have gotten one in to put to the test. If there's anything I didn't answer in this video that you want to know about, go check out my first look at this bike, leave a comment down below, or really you could also reach out to Wyatt Bikes and I'm sure they're happy to give you an answer. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this and watch out for some of the other reviews and videos I've got coming up in the future. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.